outlaw biker world runs on fear. The patches, the clubhouses, the wars, all of it built to convince everyone watching that these are the most dangerous men alive. And some of them are. But hidden inside the police files of that world is another history, one the clubs never talk about, of members who ran themselves over with their own evidence. A killer convicted by his own eyebrow. Two bosses put on trial by their own best-selling book. A club president brought down by one-star reviews. These are the biker criminals who were too dumb for crime, counted down from embarrassing to unbelievable. The man who bought his patch online. Gary was a member of the Iron Order Motorcycle Club until the day the club threw him out, and the reason they gave was cowardice. In the biker world, that word follows a man everywhere. Most men in that position disappear quietly. Gary decided to get revenge on his former club instead, and the plan he came up with would make him a target for two clubs at once. He started by going online and ordering a counterfeit Hells Angels vest shipped from China. Then he put it on, photographed himself wearing the death head, and posted the pictures as a threat to his old club, betting that the Iron Order would see the most feared colors on Earth on his back and conclude the Hells Angels now stood behind him. Instead of being frightened, they did a counter-check. The Iron Order men ran his claim through their own contacts, and the answer came back fast. Gary was not a Hells Angel. He had never been a Hells Angel. He had never even been a prospect. So the men he had threatened took screenshots, and they made sure the information reached the one organization guaranteed to care, the actual Hells Angels, a club that polices its colors so aggressively it has sued Disney and Alexander McQueen for using them. Gary's name, his photos, and his fake vest were now in front of the real club. Whatever he expected his threat to achieve, what it achieved was this. His old club wanted him for the threat, and the Hells Angels wanted him for the patch. Shortly afterward, Gary deactivated his profile and erased himself from the internet. The first sound decision recorded anywhere in his story. Real members bleed for years to earn those colors. Undercover agents spend federal careers reaching them. Gary bought them with a credit card, showed them to the exact people who would report him, and turned one enemy into two without committing a single actual crime. The president who review-bombed a restaurant, Dale Kelland, held one of the most feared titles in Canadian crime. President of the Manitoba Nomads, a chapter of the Hells Angels, a senior figure in an organization that police forces on 5 continents classify as a criminal empire, a club whose responses to disrespect have historically involved bombings, beatings, and 50-year wars. When a man like that is insulted, the insult usually gets answered in ways that end up in court files. In March 2018, the insult came from a small hotel in Winnipeg. The Marion Hotel turned Kelland's members away at the door for wearing their colors. The same gang paraphernalia banned half the bars in Canada in force, and the president of the Nomads decided the club would respond. The club's supporters waited for the word. The word, when it came, was a Facebook post. Kelland called on the Hells Angels and their supporters to boycott the business and flood it with negative reviews, and they obeyed in droves. When the hotel took its page down, the campaign turned on the restaurant inside it, the Marion Street Eatery, a soup and sandwich spot with a 4.5-star rating, and within 24 hours, hundreds of one-star reviews, most from accounts outside Canada, had dragged it to 3 stars. The most feared motorcycle club on Earth was conducting a coordinated harassment campaign against a lunch restaurant, and its president was directing the operation in public, under his own name, from his own account. The reviews changed nothing at the hotel, and the dress code stayed. What the campaign did produce was a public, time-stamped, self-authored record of a Hells Angels president issuing instructions and hundreds of people carrying them out, which is very close to a working definition of what Canadian law calls participating in a criminal organization. Kelland was later convicted of exactly that. The club had spent decades defeating wiretaps, surveillance, and informants, and its Manitoba president had documented his own command structure voluntarily on a platform with a search bar over a table for 6. Somewhere in Winnipeg, a soup restaurant got its stars back. Kelland's record is permanent. fugitive who published a bestseller, Jonker. Nielsen shot the president of the Bullshit Motorcycle Club dead on his own driveway in Copenhagen in May 1984. Emptied the magazine into him while the man's wife watched, and cycled away on a bicycle he had stashed in a van. Within hours, he was out of Denmark on a fake passport. And then he did everything right. He crossed the Atlantic. He took a false identity. He buried himself inside the East End Vancouver chapter of the Hells Angels, the most violent chapter in Western Canada, working as a bouncer, brawling in the streets alongside police officers who had no idea the man next to them was wanted for murder on another continent. An ocean away, Danish police were hunting a ghost. They had no name, no country, no trail. Month after month, the file went nowhere, because a manhunt only works if something surfaces. A sighting, a letter, a slip. Jonker made no slips. He was disciplined, patient, and invisible, and the longer the silence held, the colder his trail went. By 1985, 1 year in, he had effectively won. All he had to do was continue being nobody. Instead, he wrote his autobiography. He published it under his own name, and it was not some pamphlet that sank without a trace. Mit Liv, My Life, became a bestseller in Denmark, the exact country hunting him. Millions of Danes were now reading the life story of the man their police could not find, his face moving through bookstores, his voice in every chapter, while the author collected royalties under a false name in Vancouver. Every fugitive alive works to make the world forget he exists. Jonker had made himself one of the most famous criminals in Scandinavia, from hiding, on purpose. The trail the police could not find, the book handed them. He was identified, arrested, and extradited, and a Danish court gave him 16 years for the murder he had written his way around in print. And the final twist is that Jonker never saw the mistake. He kept publishing from prison, stayed a celebrity for 40 years, and by the end, the books had made him more famous than the club itself. The hiding failed completely. The advertising worked. The bosses convicted by their own book. For 20 years, German prosecutors had a problem, and the problem had two names. Leslav Hausa and Peter Maxolek had come up together from Gelsenkirchen, a mining town in the Ruhr. And in 1999, they pulled off the single deal that created Bandidos Germany, patching over an entire existing club in one stroke. From that seed, they grew the largest Bandidos operation in Europe. 74 chapters, 1,200 members, with Maxolek as national co-president and House as European sergeant-at-arms, the officer in charge of weapons and discipline. The state knew what they had built, proving it was another matter because the whole structure ran on the oldest rule in the outlaw world. Club business stays inside the club. No documents, no witnesses, no way in. For 2 decades, that wall held. Investigations opened and stalled. The two men got older, richer, and further out of reach. And by the 2000s, they had something close to victory, an empire the law could see but not touch. Then, in 2013, they wrote it all down. The memoir was called Ziemlich böse Freunde, Pretty Bad Friends. And in it, the two bosses described, in their own words, how they had founded and built the German Bandidos, the brothel they ran, the bars, the deals, the whole architecture the prosecutors had spent 20 years failing to establish. And Germany loved it. The book became a Spiegel bestseller, sold in every bookstore in the country, the confession the state could never extract, available in hardcover, signed by the authors. It took 7 years for the bill to arrive. In October 2020, Hausa and Maxolek stood trial in Hagen for attempted murder, arms dealing, and membership in a criminal organization. And among the evidence the prosecution carried into court was the book. Their own passages were read back to them at their own trial. 2 men listening to their bestseller testify for the other side. The wall that had protected them for 20 years had been dismantled by its own builders for royalties. Within a year, the federal government banned their entire Bandidos Federation, 1,800 officers hitting 5 states at once, and in 2024, House defected to the Hells Angels and took 200 members with him. The empire is gone. The book is still in print. It is the only part of the operation the state never managed to shut down. The man who bribed witnesses through his own lawyer, Klaus Otto, built no surrender from nothing. A bouncer at 17, a scrap dealer from the Dutch traveler community, he founded the club in February 2013 and took its highest rank, Captain World. And within a decade, it had swollen past 1,600 members across the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Spain, and Morocco, big enough to overtake the Hells Angels on their own soil. And Otto had one more advantage the state could not crack: fear. When prosecutors finally built their case against him, extortion, beatings, a victim locked in a cage, threats to cut the ears off a man's children, they hit a wall the court itself acknowledged. A large share of the witnesses called against Otto did not dare to testify. Men arrived at the courthouse and lost their memories at the door. The case that convicted him in 2018 succeeded despite the silence. 6 years for extortion, assault, threats, and laundering 1.3 million euros through a sunbed studio. But everyone involved understood the arithmetic. If the remaining witnesses stayed frightened, the appeals could go his way, and the empire could survive its founder's absence. So Otto went to work on the witnesses from his cell. And the method he chose was the reason he belongs on this list. He ran the intimidation through intermediaries, and among the channels he used was his own lawyer. The one man in the entire justice system whose visits were guaranteed, whose communications were privileged, whose job was to get Otto out, became a conduit for reaching the people whose silence Otto needed, and the operation was exactly as invisible as a scheme running through a courthouse's front door could be expected to be, which is to say, not invisible at all. Investigators traced the tampering, and the man who was already serving 6 years collected a fresh conviction for trying to influence witnesses from custody, adding time to the sentence he had been trying to escape. The cell phone compounds from there. The witness tampering did not free him, and it did not save the club. In 2022, the Dutch Supreme Court banned no surrender outright and permanently. Only the second motorcycle club ever outlawed in the country. Otto had survived a bullet to the neck, years of prosecutions, and a courtroom full of witnesses too terrified to speak. And the thing he could not survive was his own follow-through. He had the silence he needed. He tampered with it anyway, through the most traceable channel available, and converted a fragile win into a longer sentence and a dead club. The fear he built worked on everyone except the courts, and the only man who ever added years to Klaus Otto's prison time was Klaus Otto. The support driver in the team, Jersey Barry Smith, had the one job in a biker convoy that comes with no risk at all. On a July Saturday in 2021, around 125 Satan slaves and their supporters rolled south through the Scottish borders, and Smith, a 42-year-old former serviceman from Dunfermline, drove the support van at the back, the vehicle that exists to help riders who break down or crash. Whatever happened on that run, the support driver was the man furthest from trouble. He carried no colors on a bike. He threw no punches. He was, in every sense that mattered to a courtroom, staff. Then the convoy crossed members of the Tribe Motorcycle Club on the A7 near Selkirk. The two sides spilled onto the tarmac fighting, and Smith made his first bad decision. He aimed the support van at a tribe rider named Andrew Lamb and drove into him, hurling him off his motorcycle with injuries that needed urgent hospital treatment. It was attempted murder in broad daylight, but daylight alone convicts nobody, and what happened next is why Smith is on this list, because every move he made afterward was a gift to the prosecution, hand-wrapped. He did not stop, which turned a roadside incident into a hit-and-run with 100 witnesses. He drove on with the van's front end visibly smashed, then abandoned it a short distance down the road, leaving a damaged vehicle registered to the convoy sitting on the verge like a signed statement. And through all of it, from the moment of impact to the moment a passing motorist's camera found him standing beside the wreck, Barry Smith was wearing a t-shirt printed with 4 letters, SFFS, Slaves Forever, Forever Slaves. The one man in the entire convoy whose role gave him distance from the club had dressed himself in the club's initials, committed the day's worst crime on a public road, and been filmed in the merchandise. The trial took a week, and the jury took little of it seriously. The film existed, the van existed, the shirt existed. Convicted of attempted murder, Smith held his head in his hands as a juror wept at the verdict, and the judge gave him 8 years. The Satan's Slaves have 29 chapters and 6 decades of history, and the lesson of Barry Smith now circulates through all of them. If the plan is to commit attempted murder and flee, the team jersey stays at home. The man who kept the hammer, Ian Ewing, had the best cover story of any man on this list. 44 years old, from Newton Hill near Aberdeen. He worked as an operations manager whose contracts included maintenance for the police and the fire service. He was, on paper, a man the emergency services trusted with their own buildings, and nothing about his life pointed anywhere else. The Blue Angels, Scotland's oldest outlaw club, had been pushing into the Northeast for years, swallowing smaller clubs and leaning on the rest. And their newest asset was a respectable professional no police database would ever flag. On the 8th of September 2018, that asset went to work. A group of Nomads club members was riding the A98 near Cullen when Ewing and a car full of men cut them off, and Ewing drove his Vauxhall Insignia straight into rider Colin Sutherland, knocking him off the bike and onto the road. 4 men came out of the car carrying a claw hammer, a tire iron, and a baseball bat, and what followed put 4 bikers in hospital. 1 airlifted out by Coast Guard helicopter. Sutherland went unconscious under the blows and woke without his club waistcoat, which had been cut off his body with a knife. Passing drivers sat frozen, filming as men swung hammers into bodies on the tarmac. Then the attackers got back in the car and drove away, and the ambush, planned and executed in minutes, was over. And here is where Ewing's respectable, careful, professional mind simply switched off. The attack had produced exactly one physical object that could tie him to the violence, the claw hammer carrying his DNA, its head bearing the precise shape of its work. A man with 30 seconds and a river solves that problem forever. Ewing solved it by sliding the hammer under the passenger seat of his own car. Police stopped the car shortly after the attack with Ewing still in it, searched it, and found the hammer where he had tucked it, his DNA on the handle, the head a perfect match for an indentation in one victim's helmet. In the same search, they found a top printed with the words, Blue Angels Northeast, the secret affiliation folded neatly alongside the murder weapon. The respectable operations manager had driven away from a hammer attack carrying the hammer, the DNA, and the club merchandise in one vehicle, a mobile evidence locker with him at the wheel. At trial, he admitted nothing, shaking his head through the verdict and shaking it still as the judge called the ambush brutal and planned, and gave him 7 years for attempted murder and the assault of 3 more men. The final twist did the arithmetic on what the hammer cost him. His co-accused were acquitted. Everyone, and the men who had swung iron alongside him, walked free. The only person the evidence could touch was the man who had driven it home. The raid undone by a change of clothes. On a November evening in 2018, 13 men in balaclavas and dark clothing walked through the dark toward a social club outbuilding in Blindley Heath, Surrey, a room the bikers inside called the Shud, where the Vikings Motorcycle Club and their support crew, the Wargs Brotherhood, were holding their ordinary weekly meeting. The 13 came through the door with knives and blunt weapons and took the room apart. 7 men went down with serious wounds, 1 stabbed through the arm. Another opened across the stomach so badly he needed bowel surgery and 29 staples. Then the attackers were gone. Back into the night, faces covered, gone before anyone could follow. The men were prospects of the Hells Angels and the Red Devils, sent to terrorize a rival club as the price of their future patches, and they had left behind a room full of blood and not one identifiable face. Masked raids like that one go unsolved all the time. 13 anonymous men, a dark night, covered faces, no names. Every hour that passed without an arrest made the case colder, and the men who had planned it could reasonably believe they had gotten away clean. Przemysław Piwonia got them all caught, because after stabbing 7 men in a coordinated raid, the 41-year-old from Slough went home and did not change his clothes. Within 24 hours, a witness description of a vehicle led police to him, and when they took him, he was still wearing the leathers from the attack, soaked in the blood of the men from the Shud. There was no interrogation to survive, no case to argue. The evidence was on his body, worn voluntarily, a full day later. And his arrest was the thread that unraveled everything, because investigators worked outward from Pywonia through number plate cameras, CCTV, and phone data until they had 6 more men, and the anonymous raid had names. All 7 denied everything through an 8-week trial, and all 7 were convicted of grievous bodily harm with intent and a stack of weapons charges. 14 years each, more than 150 years between them, handed down by a judge who called it a turf war fought by prospects trying to earn their spurs. 6 of the 13 raiders were never identified, and they owe their freedom to nothing but distance from Pywonia. The mask hid his face for 10 minutes. The leathers convicted him for 14 years, and the only laundry load in Surrey that ever mattered was the one he never ran. The rocket that convicted its own shooter. At the top of this list stands the only man on it who committed his crime with a weapon designed for war, and still managed to injure exactly 1 person on his own side: himself. By October 1996, the Great Nordic Biker War had been burning for 2 years, and it had escalated past anything Europe had seen from outlaw clubs. Anti-tank rockets had been stolen from Swedish army depots and fired at clubhouses in Finland and Sweden. Machine guns, grenades, and landmines were moving through the hands of bikers across 4 countries. And in Copenhagen, a Bandidos prospect named Niels Poulsen was given the kind of assignment that makes a man's reputation forever. The Hells Angels were holding their annual party at their fortified Copenhagen headquarters, roughly 150 people inside. Poulsen's job was to put a rocket into the building. The weapon was a Carl Gustaf, an 84mm recoilless anti-tank rifle built to destroy armored vehicles, stolen from a Swedish military depot. At 3:05 in the morning on October 6th, Poulsen climbed to the roof of a building beside the clubhouse, shouldered the launcher, aimed at a structure full of people, and fired. The rocket punched through the concrete wall and exploded inside, killing 2 people, a Hells Angels prospect and a 29-year-old local woman named Jana Krohn, who had come to the party from a poster on the street, and wounding 19 more. Within 9 days, Denmark's parliament had passed an emergency law to strip biker clubs of their fortresses. One trigger pull had changed the country's legal system. As an act of war, it was total. As a crime, it was a masterclass in self-destruction, because the Carl Gustaf is a 2-man weapon with a violent backblast, and Poulsen fired it alone, and in doing so he injured his own eye. Bleeding on the rooftop, in the dark, he pulled off his ski mask, the mask now carrying his blood, his DNA, his identity, and then he left it on the roof and fled. Investigators found the mask where he dropped it. The DNA came back to Niels Poulsen, and there was nothing else the case needed. The man had fired the loudest shot of the entire Nordic War, wounded himself doing it, bled into the one item concealing who he was, and then donated that item to the crime scene. No informant betrayed him. No witness identified him. No surveillance caught him. The evidence that convicted Niels Poulsen was manufactured by Niels Poulsen at the moment of firing, out of his own face. He was convicted in March 1998 and sentenced to life, one of the only men in the entire war to be directly convicted for its violence. And the reason was not that he was the most dangerous. It was that he was the only one who signed his work. Somewhere in the logic of the outlaw world, a prospect proves himself through an act of war and earns his patch. Poulsen proved something else. A man can be trusted with an anti-tank weapon and still be undone by a ski mask. And the most secure identity protection ever issued to a Danish biker was defeated by its owner's own eyebrow. The dumbest criminals in the outlaw world are not the men who kept the hammer, wore the leathers, or published the memoir. They are the organizations that built a security system to catch exactly one kind of enemy, ran every candidate through it for years, and kept pinning their own colors on federal agents. The individual failures on this list cost the men their freedom. The institutional one filled the prisons, and it is still running. 10 stories, 1 lesson. The outlaw world's image is discipline and menace, and its case files are full of men who defeated themselves, hammers kept, leathers worn, memoirs published, masks left behind. But the club survived every fool on this list, because for all the stupidity, the machine itself kept running, and the machine had men of a very different kind. Men who never left evidence, never talked, and killed for 15 years without the police even looking their way. Click the next video to meet the deadliest of them all, the Hells Angels hitman who murdered 43 people, and what finally brought him down.